Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got some r/BoomersBeingFools for you all. As per usual, I'll be narrating the post, giving you my opinions, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Slippery Tom. My kids are going back to school in less than 2 weeks, and they haven't seen their boomer grandparents once this summer. I have two 13-year-old girls. When I was their age, I practically spent my entire summer at my grandparents' house. I cut their grass for them, I helped with their landscaping, I helped cook dinners, and my grandmother helped teach me how to cook. And my grandfather taught me a lot of practical skills, including woodworking, house maintenance, etc. The last time we saw my mom was my kid's birthday, in March. My in-laws we've not seen since Christmas. My mother lives in a private neighborhood on several acres with trees screening them from the road so no one can see their house. Yet, she obsesses over her landscape. She spends pretty much all of her free time working on her landscape, spending money on fresh mulch, new plants, etc. No one but her and her boyfriend can see it. Every time I try to make plans or suggest we stop by to visit, she's always too busy. She has to cut the grass or mulch or cut new edge lines or something. They have 3 spare bedrooms at their house set up for visitors. My children haven't stayed at their house since they were infants. And my in-laws are the same way. All of their kids are out of the house. They have 3 bedrooms in their basement sitting empty. My girls would love to spend time with their grandparents. A few months ago, we asked my in-laws if they would consider watching them for a few hours so my wife and I could go out to dinner for our 15th anniversary. Sorry, our dogs don't do well with strangers. Strangers, was the response we got from my mother-in-law. When I was a kid, my grandparents literally argued over who was going to spend time with me. My maternal grandfather was miffed that he lived further away and got to see me less than my paternal grandparents. When he was alive, he would drive down several times a year and pick me and my sister up for a long weekend. I've even tried addressing this with my mother. After several years of failed hinting around, I finally just straight up pointed out how her and my dad had dropped me off at my grandparents every single weekend so her and my dad could go bar hopping and fuck off. And now it's time to pay that piper. Nope, I was told how rude and horrible I was and that I shouldn't expect her to do anything. Well, my kids are almost high schoolers and about past that age where they'd want to spend quality time with them anyways. They're going to be shocked when they want nothing to do with them. A couple of shitty Christmas presents isn't going to buy their love at this age. I'm not sure what they expect, but I'm saving all of these text messages for in a few years for when they're retired, less mobile, and start asking why no one comes and visits them, so I can remind them that they made their bed and now they can lay in it. Honestly, it sounds more like your parents just have a history of being selfish. I would say you're definitely right to save those screenshots and collect them because there will be a time where their selfishness catches up with them and they expect to be treated nicely, and if that is the case and their selfishness continues, they're going to learn that you can't just keep taking and taking and taking, that if you're going to take, you also got to give. It's got to be an equal transaction when it comes to how you interact with your family. Now, of course, there is an argument to be made that you are coming off as entitled to their time, which is kind of a weird fucking statement to make when it comes to their grandparents, but at the same time, if that's the bed they want to make and they want to live in, I mean, they can do that. But, hold them to it. If they don't want to be in their grandkids' life, then that's on them. When no one comes to visit them, that's something they've got to deal with. Just keep collecting those text messages, and the fact alone that they've referred to your kids as strangers is fucking wild. David Parmet. Boomer thinks me checking my messages is funny. This happened a few years ago. My mother, who has since passed away, was in the hospital. My sister, who lived near her, was at her bedside, texting updates to our other sister and myself, so I was pretty much attached to my phone. I was waiting for the elevator in my building when I got the alert for an incoming message. So I checked, and it was another update from my sister. I was still reading it when the elevator doors opened, and I walked in. The only other person in this elevator was an old biddy I affectionately referred to, even before this happened, as Hatchet Face. She always seemed to be offended by something, like the increasingly ethical, diverse families moving into our building. Hatchet Face took notice of me staring at my phone and started to laugh. I gave her my best what the fuck face and asked her what was so funny. She said, "You people always staring at your phones." My mood went from bewildered to furious. I spat out, "I'm reading a message from my sister about our mother who's in the hospital. I'm really glad you find my mother in the hospital be funny." Since then, when she sees me in the building, she walks the other way. is definitely the best response for, a female boomer, but if it's a male boomer, if you really want to fuck with him, and if you have this kind of interaction, just tell him the stock market crashed and you're watching your portfolio drain. Or something along those lines. Just give him yeah, I just can't believe the market crashed today. The Dow's down by 1,300 points. And then enjoy the few moments that you get as the panic just sets over their face and they just have a complete meltdown in the elevator. I also think the whole, oh, you kids on your phones, I think that's rooted in jealousy, if I'm going to be honest with you, because, who wouldn't want to have access to the entire outside world, every piece of information known to man, be able to call, contact, text, or message any person you want to who you know at a moment's notice and the swipe of a finger. I think they're just jealous they didn't have access to that when they were our age, and, they just kind of take it out on us by, well, bullshit like this. Merrick Lord. Boomer yelled at me because I refused to break the law. Boomer story. Well, today was a fun day at work. Part of my job is to refill propane tanks. Part of that is inspecting them to make sure the date on the tank is good, since the tanks themselves are only good for 10 years. So something like 01-8 is invalid because it's considered expired, but something like 07-17 is good because it's still valid until the next year, 2025. Pretty simple to understand, right? It's simply out of safety because a bad tank can cause plenty of problems. And it's relatively easy to get a tank re-inspected, so it's good for another 5 years after its inspection date. This customer comes up to me wanting to refill his tank. I inspected his tank and saw that the date was around 0406, so naturally, I explained to him that it was not a good tank and that his options were either a refund, a new tank, or telling him where he could get it to get recertified. It would be against the law for me to fill it up, let alone how dangerous it could be for them too. Most customers I've dealt with are understanding, but not this guy. Immediately, he starts screaming at me a wide variety of complaints. Fucking socialism, fucking Biden is destroying this fucking country. I can't get my fucking propane. I'm taken aback by his statement because it came right the hell out of nowhere. I try to de-escalate the situation and explain to him these laws have been in place for a long time, and it's ultimately for his safety. He's still very angry with me and demands I fill his tank. I again apologize, and before I can even finish my sentence, he says, I don't want you to be sorry, I want you to fuck off, as he storms inside the shop to get his refund. Honestly, I just don't understand these people. How can you become this angry and entitled? I've been trying to think of something that you could retort with to kind of throw him off his trail, but honestly, there's not a damn thing that you could probably say to him to pull him out of his mind beyond just telling him a blatant lie of, well, actually, sir, these laws and policies were put in by Trump for your safety. His tone would have switched by 180 degrees right then and there, and he would have been thankful for them, but that's assuming, of course, you'll be able to get a word in the first place. Hell, truth being, you could tell him it's against the law, you would be liable for it, and on top of that, you could get fined hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know what the exact fine would look like for this, but, you could tell him all of that, and he'd be like, no, it's fine, I won't tell. But then if the tank malfunctions and something happens, you bet he's gonna be coming back to you and lying and saying that you sold him a faulty tank. There's no winning with this. Overall, though, part of me does wonder if the hair trigger response by a lot of boomers is because of the lead paint poisoning. I've met plenty of boomers who are well-tempered and pleasant people to chat with, but every now and then you do encounter one that, it's just they have a ticking time bomb in them and the slightest little thing is just gonna set them off and suddenly everyone's a target. Icy Purpose, 4990. Lady came all the way to my job to confront me after I hung up on her. Boomer freak out. So, I have a lot of stories of boomer foolery from my years of working in retail, literally enough to write a book, but this is one of them. I used to work in the cosmetics department for a very popular brand. We were always busy and some days were non-stop. So this particular day was during the holidays, and I remember being behind the register with a crazy long line, along with other clients waiting to be helped, makeup appointments arriving, etc. This lady calls on the phone and is asking about a product from a different counter. I tell her I don't work for that brand, but I can transfer her over. She goes, no, I don't want to be transferred. You can walk over there yourself and tell me if they have said product. I tell her every department is separate and the person there will assist her. She completely disregards everything I said and repeats that I need to personally go over there and check. I also tell her that it's slammed at my counter and I couldn't even leave if I wanted to, because I have clients waiting. I'm still at this point being patient and professional even though this lady is pushing it. She starts getting stern, like she's talking to a child or her own personal employee, and tells me something along the lines of, "I'm telling you to go over there yourself and tell me because that's what good customer service is." Now I'm getting pissed off because in the time that I've wasted talking to her, she could have been transferred and already know if they had what she wanted. You also aren't going to talk down to me like I'm beneath you. It's clear she just wanted to be demanding and unreasonable, and when I see that's the intention, I'm not going to play their power games. I tell her, "Okay ma'am, I'm transferring you now." She starts asking me for my name and I tell her I'm not giving it to her. I transfer her, hung up the phone, and try to assist as many clients at the same time as I can because there are even more people waiting now. About 20 minutes later, I'm behind the register with a never-ending line of people. I see this one annoyed-looking lady who resembles the leprechaun from those horror movies come stalking over to my department, and she's just looking for trouble, I can tell. Don't ask me how I knew, but I had a gut feeling that it was the lady from the phone earlier. She comes up to the counter, but not to where she is with the people waiting for help. She comes up to the side of the counter like you would if you just wanted to ask a quick question. I kid you not. She turns her head to listen to each of the workers behind the counter as we're speaking to customers so she can figure out who it was she spoke to on the phone by our voices. Now, I knew it was her for sure, and I was in disbelief, and honestly amused that this lady, who was too important to wait for a call to be transferred to the correct department, somehow had enough time to physically come to the counter to confront me. I'm watching her from the corner of my eye, but don't acknowledge her. By now, my coworkers have noticed this woman and her weird behavior, and I tell them I'm pretty sure it's the crazy lady who called earlier. Leprechaun lady isn't saying anything, just eyeballing us and leaning in to hear us talk. Eventually, she points at me and goes, "It was you!" I look at her disinterestedly and say, "Excuse me?" She says that I'm the one who wouldn't help her on the phone earlier, and she wants my name, the number to corporate, and to speak to a manager. Mind you, we're still slammed with customers and everyone is looking at her making a scene. I kept my cool because that was making her even more angry that I was being so nonchalant. I tell her now that she is here, she can go check the counter herself for her product. I also let her know that I'm still not giving her my name because her behavior makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable, and that if she doesn't get away from me, I'm calling security. By now, she has pretty much everyone in the vicinity looking at her crazy, and I guess she decided not to push her luck and finally left in a huff. That was one of the most ridiculous encounters I had at the job. She clearly had too much time on her hands and wanted to use it to go cause problems. I can only imagine the issues she causes everywhere she goes. I've heard rumors and tellings, and I don't know how true this is, of boomers who will specifically go out of their way to cause problems with corporate and just essentially file as many complaints as possible and find the smallest thing to lose their mind over, just so they can get some kind of coupon or voucher to save a couple dollars. Now, while I don't know how true this is, but if there was ever a candidate to be a perfect poster child for this exact tactic, I would say it's probably her. Honestly though, that is really damn creepy that she just stood there eyeing everyone down and listening in with her head rotating like she's some kind of like... Ugh. Honestly, she'd be a really good spirit Halloween decoration. AEW for life! Boomer at the dog park asks for my boss's cell phone number. Boomer story. The dog park seems to be the only place I encounter these fun people. Today, there was a boomer with an older golden retriever that clearly was not super happy about being around a bunch of other dogs. Just stood still next to a bench and then would half snap/bark at any dogs that ran by. His dog eventually got into a scuffle with someone else's dog. Shit happens, they're dogs. But this guy proceeds to absolutely rip into this lady with about every curse word I have ever heard. I can't even type it coherently because it was just a stream of F word after insult. Keep in mind, his dog started all of this. Me and another guy stepped in for the lady, and the boomer got real defensive real fast, acting like we were attacking him and his dog. After a few "I'll call the police" threats, this grown-ass adult man, who has been on this world for probably 60 plus years, looked into a stranger's face in a public dog park and proceeded to say to me, "What is your boss's phone number? This is unacceptable." I just replied, "I don't work at the dog park, man." And he looked really confused and proceeded to head out of the park. I don't really know what else to add here. At first, I was trying to understand why someone would react that way. Now I just think it's funny. Edit, you all are so much more clever than I am. Bro really just pulled out the "I'm gonna tell on you" card. Damn, dude. What's he gonna do if the person turns out to be self-employed? Like what's he gonna do then? Because his entire power dynamic he wanted to have with the person just doesn't work in the slightest. "Oh, you're your own boss? Well, then give me one of your clients' phone numbers." Actually, sir, I don't have any clients. Like, I'm of course in a unique position where this would be really fucking funny, and he would probably lose his shit finding out that I'm a YouTuber. Trottle 11. That's not me on the camera. I want a DNA test. Hello, Internet. Figured I'd share a story that happened to me a couple years ago. I was working night shifts at the front desk of a hotel on weekends. It was a large one, very close to the local train station in a bigger city, so it was always rather busy. The hotel had an integrated bar. I usually was alone at the front desk, and this happened shortly after I began there. Anyways, let's get to it. So, I was doing some paperwork at the front desk while attending to guests. It was shortly after the start of my shift, probably around 11 p.m. A guest came up to me and informed me that someone had just stuck a chewing gum below the front desk. So, I have a look and, yeah, there was fresh bubble gum sticking there. Now, for context, if you ever work nights, you know how mentally taxing it is, especially when you start. The lack of sleep and the changes to your rhythm make you angry and irritated. So, while I could have just cleaned it and moved on with my life, I was out for blood more than I usually would have been. Expecting it to be a child that could use the lesson of cleaning up after themselves, I asked the guest who it was. She informed me they went up into the hotel bar and showed me who it was. I was surprised to see that it was a group of 4 boomers. Seriously? But she was sure it was her. Okay, well, this just turned awkward. I decided to play it cool, went up to the culprit and simply asked her if she by any chance forgot something at the front desk. She sternly and angrily replied that she didn't and for me to bug her off. Okay, Karen, you had your chance. Karen, I know you stuck a bubble gum under my desk. Go and clean it, please. She starts screaming at me. How dare I accuse her and lie? Embarrass her in front of her friends. She threatens to call the police for ruining her reputation. Well, I was certainly realizing this wasn't going anywhere, so I just simply replied, okay, sure, go ahead. I have it on camera just so you're aware. She again insists she'd never do anything like that. Getting annoyed, I just say, okay, sure, and leave. I had shit to do and honestly wasn't in the mood to have Karen go ballistic. So I clean up the bubblegum and go back to tending guests. Now, that should have been it. It wasn't. About 15 minutes later, she comes back with all 3 boomers. She demands to see the camera footage. Now, you might think, okay, why would anyone be so dumb? Well, I guess she thought I was bluffing and she could play it off that way. Naturally, I pull up the video of her in full HD, reaching into her mouth, pulling something out, and reaching below the desk where said gum was. The 4 stare at it. I can see that 2 of them are visibly uncomfortable. But Karen and what I assume to be her husband are not done yet. They both go ballistic and start accusing me of faking the video, trying to frame them. She then starts brabbling that I need a DNA test to ensure it's really her. Both were full on screaming at this point and making a huge scene. I had enough and informed them that I'm going to call the police and will cancel their rooms. I told them to go pack their belongings. They weren't having it. So I followed up with my threat and called the police. So the police arrives, annoyed and upset they have to deal with it. They help them pack and escort them out. And that's that. Karen fucked around and found out that day, and I had to go through a dozen hoops with reservations to sort out the mess of kicking guests out, but that was totally worth it. I can't even imagine being told that I was caught on camera doing something, and then they let me off the hook. Then I go back and be like, "Ha, prove it. I bet you can't." And they prove it. That'd be really embarrassing. I can't even imagine what she was going through, but I do imagine that what probably happened was that she was like, "Oh, I would never do that." And the friends were like, "Well, yeah, let's call him on his bluff. Let's show him that, his lies aren't going to actually do anything because he just wanted to embarrass you." And in the process of being pumped up by her friends, she probably thought that she was sly enough to not be noticed by the cameras and it wouldn't look that obvious. And, made the mistake of asking to see the footage that showed her being caught in 4K. Snazzle frazzle. Boomer crashes our private movie screening, then tries to get us kicked out of the theater. Boomer freak out. Browsing the sub has reminded me of an encounter that happened back when I was in college. At the small town where my college was located, there was a small independent movie theater that had the option to rent out one of their screens for a private showing, and that's what me and my friends did for a birthday. So we've all settled in and the movie's begun for about 10 minutes when we hear the doors open at the back of the theater, and in walks this couple that appears to be in their 60s or 70s. They walk up the stairs right over our row and, without hesitation, tell us that we're sitting in their seats. We try to tell them politely that they're mistaken, but we can't even finish our sentence before the guy explodes and starts screaming at us to get up out of their seats, calling us all sorts of insults. This goes on back and forth for a minute or so until we're finally able to ask him, amidst all of his screaming, if he noticed the giant sign in front of the door that said "Private Event," which caused him to stand there fuming silently for a moment before literally stamping his foot like a toddler and storming out of the theater with his wife, making sure to slam the door as he walks out. We thought that was the end of it, but about 15 minutes later, the movie stops and the lights come on, and the manager of the theater comes in saying that someone told him that we were in here doing drugs, destroying the seats. After convincing him that was not in fact what we were doing, he starts the movie again and everything else went smoothly. Edit, please stop commenting that I should get a refund. In hindsight, my friends and I should have, but this event happened 5 years ago. And yeah, hindsight is indeed 2020. There's a lot of things they could have definitely done in this situation, but that's not going to change what happened. I do find it wild, though, that someone would lie about something so easily verifiable. I guess when the consequences are non-existent and they can just get away with making someone's day a little bit worse, especially when they were just embarrassed by said person. May as well, right? Goddamn, dude. Maybe they just walked into the wrong theater room and that's why they demanded the seats, just not realizing what was going on. That's like the first thing that I can think of how they screwed that up that badly. Like when you go to a theater, it's like, yeah, it's theater 7 on your right. Maybe they misheard him and went to their left instead, something along those lines. That's the only justification that I can really think of for this exact scenario because, I mean, the only feasible reason I can think of is that either he thought he could strong-arm his way into a private event, or they snuck into the theater and then lied about their seats, hoping to get the best seats in the house in order to watch the movie for free. Those are the few options that I can think of how this scenario would have happened and why they would have been put in this position in the first place, but all of them are just kinda... none of them make them look good or reasonable in any format. And the fact that he immediately turned around is like, they're doing drugs. They're trashing the seats. What a goober. Asleep at the world. Boomer gets yelled at by police after investigating. Major crash. Boomer story. I was in a traffic jam on a highway. It was obvious that there had been a crash up ahead somewhere as there were tow trucks, police, and fire trucks going past. Everyone was diverting into a single lane to get through the chaos. As I neared the site, a police officer stopped the car in front of me and had a word to them. I couldn't hear what was being said, but assumed they needed to clear something as the officer then blocked the road with his police vehicle. It looked like we'd be stuck for a bit, but whatever. For all I knew, they were scraping a body off the road. Everyone is waiting, and then I notice a car coming up to my right. It's a four-wheel drive trying to nudge its way through the barricade. When he realizes he can't get through, old mate decides to get out of his car and insert himself into whatever chaos might be going on. Off the trots with his slippers over socks, right into the road where the workers were trying to clean the debris off the highway. Hands on his hips, he approaches one of the tow truck drivers. They don't say much, he just keeps standing there in the middle of the road, workers trying to avoid him with their brooms. Eventually, I see a police officer come and say a couple of words to him quietly. Then, the police officer is yelling at him to get back into his vehicle and just stay there. Old mate throws his hands in the air and shakes his head as he shambles back to his car to wait. I wonder if he just expected if he asked the officer nicely if he'd be able to cut in front of everyone and, not have to wait for the traffic. Just, ask nicely, put on a pretty please because it's a person of authority and you'll be able to make it through. But he didn't like the answer he got and instead threw a bit of a tantrum. I don't know, because I really can't think of a single other reason for someone to approach an active, ongoing, cleanup scene for an accident that could involve possible death and to essentially confront the officers the way he did. That is a recipe for disaster and at the same time, just sheer entitlement. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.